Hello one and all, and welcome to Behind the Glass. I'm your host, Sam, from the YouTube channel Seen Through Glass.
And I'm Tony from Gravelwood Car Sales.
Yes, you are. Each week we get together, we talk about cars, motorsport, F1, what else? Cars? We talk about cars. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can watch us on youtube.com/Behind the Glass. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. And Tony, if people want to support this podcast, what should they do?
Watch it.
No. But also head to Patreon. You can support us on patreon.com/Behind the Glass. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Well, everyone, today's a very exciting day because it's the latest episode in our in-depth series where essentially we get special guests on to learn about their life in and around cars. And this week we are joined by Max Chilton. Max, thanks for coming down.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you very much. It's an honour to be on this pod. I'm new to podcasts, but I'm now like hooked to them. So
he's a good-looking lad as well, isn't he?
Oh, calm down, mate.
Calm down. It's not that kind of pod.
This is going in a very weird direction very quickly. I'm glad you're honoured to be on the podcast. I therefore apologise that we're doing it at Gravelwood Car Sales because as stupendous. Well, yes, thank you. I was going to say, as glorious as this dealership is, it's not exactly that warm or welcoming.
It's not cold today, so it's not that.
I think it's cold.
Yeah, but
it's a bit nippy. I was losing traction on the way here, so it can't be that hot, warm.
What car did you come in today?
I came in a 73 2.7 RS Touring, so probably not up your street. It's probably a bit old for you. But
I've got nowhere to talk to him.
Literally, we were sitting here waiting for Max to arrive, and I heard this engine come through, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds like an old Porsche." And Tony went, "An old Porsche?
Yeah.
What would an old Porsche be doing here?"
And you bring your car today as well, so there's two old cars.
I mean, Sam's is not far off from being a classic now. It's on that. When do we get a classic? I don't really know what the verge is. 20 years?
20
years, is it?
So it's 20 years old this year.
There you go.
Ferrari officially now call it a Classic A car. So I could go and get it stamped.
You're a real dude because you classic. You daily a classic.
Dude, I'm a real dude.
I don't daily, mate. I sort of occasionally weekly it.
Tony, I do daily that car.
No, you don't.
Let Max think I'm cool. It's my dream in life. Well, anyway, bravo for bringing a stupendously cool car down today. Very impressive. We're going to talk a lot more about that because, as I say, these episodes are about sort of, your life in and around cars. And I guess fundamentally, you're a racing driver, right? That's a lot what we're going to be talking about. But in and around that, it has led to you being involved in loads of different sort of car businesses, car collections, just everything in and around road cars as well. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm just hooked by from a very young age, that car sort of, racing atmosphere. And it's a really weirdly small world. Like everyone sort of knows someone. You just mention a name. Oh yeah, I met him, or I know him, or I bought a car from him, or I've raced for him. Like the whole motorsport world is very connected to the car world. And it just all works in really well. And the thing I love about it, it's a passion for everyone. So you can just get chatting to a complete stranger about cars, and before you know it, you spent ages chatting about sort of what tyre or spring rates you're using.
I always say it's the best thing when you get to a dinner party and you don't know anyone. If there's one other car guy there, you're sorted. Like
absolutely.
Or car girl. Sorry.
Then that leads into watches, and and then you start talking about other things. So they're all related.
Hands, don't they? Cars and watches go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And you've always liked cars.
Always. I mean, it probably started, if I'm honest, it started when I was probably like 3 or 4. I wanted to be a greenskeeper at a golf course because they had these really funky like lawnmowers which like folded out and then they could like mow a whole sort of green in one motion. I thought that's cool. Then I thought, I want to be something bigger, so I'll be a farmer. I can drive a big tractor. The dream was like one of those Clarkson Farms Lamborghini tractors. How cool that would be. And then I realised that there was a thing called racing, and listening to Murray Walker at the race weekends, lights out, off we go. Actually, lights out is more of a modern trait. Murray Walker was the
go. Yeah,
and
exactly.
then you would get everyone's names wrong, and you're like, no, it's not Schumacher. It's
exactly. Somebody completely different lunging up the inside.
So that's sort of where I learned racing from. My dad was hugely passionate about it. He got my brother into racing. My brother was 14. I'm 6 years younger than him, so I was 8 at the time. Just old enough to start karting, but I didn't for a year. I sort of went around the paddocks with my brother, sort of proper racing tracks, as I call it, on my scooter, wishing I could go fast. So it was time then for me to get into a go-kart. So I started at probably just shy of 9, which actually now is really old. Most of them are starting at like 3 or 4 in Bambinos. Amazing. And then the passion went from there. I was naturally quite tall and skinny, so I was built for single-seater racing. My brother's built like a rugby player, so he's built for like touring car racing.
And he still races now, your brother?
Yeah, he's been in touring cars over 20 years now.
Wow.
He's done British for probably 16 or 17 of those. He did World for 3. He won the World Independence touring car championship. And he's super professional at what he does.
Yeah.
I'm good with the downforce stuff. He scares the living daylights out of me in cars. Like, we'll do some track days and I'm there like trying to find the brake pedal. Like, Jeff, feel very nervous.
I do feel like most racing drivers are nervous passengers.
I hate being a passenger.
I can imagine.
Have you done any tuition?
I have done tuition. I'm a little bit scared of it because I'd rather, and this is where you've got to like let them take you out if you are going to let them take you out, then scare the living daylights out of them and then leave them to it. Because if you go out with them after you've just shown them how to do it, they think that they can do it, and then that's when you're in the real sort of danger seat. So,
well, I mean, that's basically how we first met. So,
Yes.
for those who aren't familiar, maybe didn't see the video back in the day, because I think it was 2017, maybe ish, 2016,
Yeah.
2017. We met because I did one of my favorite videos I've actually ever filmed on my main channel, which was me trying to beat a lap time I'd set on Forza, but in real life, in my little Abarth, and we went down to Brands Hatch, and you were my coach for the day. And whenever it was, I say maybe 2016. 2017. It's probably only a few years since you were driving in Formula One. So at the time, for me to have a Formula One driver,
Almost current.
It must have been a couple of
it
years.
was a couple of years after. Yeah.
Give him some credit. It's current.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, he's still a Formula One driver.
Yeah.
You know, fundamentally, me there being super overexcited and loving that, you were probably inside going, "Oh my God, what is this idiot doing behind the wheel? This is terrifying. Get me out of here."
But did it work? Did you
worked.
achieve it?
Yeah,
It did.
I beat the lap time. I couldn't believe
I think
it.
it was within like half a second, if I remember correctly. I remember being on the tower, control tower, timing it. I was like, he's so close. And then you did it, and I was like, yes.
Come on. Do you remember though? Tony was there as well that day.
Was he?
Yes, I didn't know. We actually all met at the same time, whenever it was.
Yeah.
Must be, it was
Small world.
just around the corner at Brands Hatch. But
We only said hello though. Like,
Yeah, I sort of do remember because I've met you
Yeah.
once. It was at a Romans Cars and Coffee as well.
right.
yeah. But I think, as I say, if that was kind of when we first met, let's go back to the sort of beginning, because you mentioned your brother, a successful racing driver. I've already touched on the fact Formula One, IndyCar, Le Mans, your racing history also super impressive. How does that even begin? Where do you even start? So you got to the point where you decided you didn't want to race a tractor or drive a tractor, but you wanted to go racing. How do you go racing? Did the fact that your brother was already racing help? Where did it start?
That definitely helped, but it goes back to sort of my father. He was hugely passionate about racing and had the odd sort of like nice car, and he's worked really hard to sort of. He started with Porsches and then sort of fell in love with Ferraris. And once my brother was racing, it was like, I wanted to have a go. And I was fortunate enough, karting isn't cheap. Even back then, it's the same now. It's just the costs just keep going up and up. But I started in the Kent Championship at a place called Bayford Meadows in the middle of Maidstone. Then I did Batmobile Park and then Lydd, which is on the Kent coast. And that was called the Kent Championship. And I did that for probably a year in cadets. But it's super competitive karting.
Batmobile's cool as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. I was missing pretty much every Friday to try and just get better and better. It was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it doesn't take you long to get hooked. And I was like, I want to be a Formula One driver. That's the ultimate goal. I don't know anyone that's in karting that doesn't want to be a Formula One driver. If you're there, that's where you wanted to get to. And, things went well. I was fortunate enough I could get in a nice team with a nice car. I had like people giving me good tuition. I worked at it, and we sort of went up through the ranks through karting. And then I was very early to always make the jump. So my last year in karting, it was 2006. I broke a rib. I won the race.
How old was you then?
Pardon?
How old was you then?
I was 14. So I was testing T-Cars, which is like a mini touring car, space frame chassis. It was the predecessor to the Ginetta. Ginetta sort of took over.
So you was karting for
I was karting for probably 5-6 years.
Okay.
But the last year I sort of overlapped with testing this thing called a T-car. You couldn't race it until you're 14. So I was testing a car at 13. And then I did a couple of years of the T-Car Championship. And again, the last year of doing the T-Cars, I was testing a Formula 3 car. You're not allowed to race a Formula 3 car still to this day until you're 16. So I did like a year and a half of private testing in an F3 car. Luckily, the MSA allowed me to qualify when I was still 15 on the Saturday at Donington Park. And then I raced on my birthday, on my 16th birthday
That's
at
amazing.
Donington Park. So I'm still, this day, the youngest person to ever race a Formula 3 car, which was amazing. And, those things are fast. Like, still to this day, I think a Formula 3 car, power to weight ratio gives you the best satisfaction on a racing track.
Does it?
Out of anything.
Really?
Yeah, because it's not overly powered, but it's got unbelievable amounts of grip. Go around Silverstone, you're flat at Copse, you're flat at Stowe. It's just mad downforce for the power.
Is it an easy thing to get in and drive? So just to let you know, Max.
Here we go.
I have driven a few race cars in my time.
Here we
as Tony
go.
will know, including a Formula One car, which we can come back to.
Restricted.
I did watch it. I saw it.
Good man. But on that day, and I've talked about this a lot on this podcast, we drove F4 cars for the entire morning building up to it. And the F4 cars felt like big go-karts, right? You know, you could sort of manhandle them a bit. They were moving around. You sort of felt in control. When the minute I got in the Formula One car, the mechanical grip was so high, I suddenly sort of felt, I don't know, disconnected almost. Like it was just like a more robotic, weirdly.
Do you think you went slower in the Formula One car?
Yes.
I think
Absolutely.
that happens regularly.
Okay.
Because I see some people on track days and they get into the, I don't do a lot of track days, but I've done a couple recently. And people get in this mindset, oh my God, I'm in a, you know, and they're driving. I'm like, you'd drive quicker going to Asda than you would do on this track. Just, you know, concentrate.
They're scared of it, aren't they?
Massively. And they're usually in like a nice Porsche or Ferrari. And there's like a bloke in a saloon Volvo. It just comes flying past.
Flying through.
So
So Formula 3 car then, do you think Tony and I could jump in one of those and after half a morning be pretty confident in it? Or is it quite tricky to get up to speed in?
Tyre temp, this goes back to that famous Top Gear episode with Hammond driving that, you know, Renault trying to get enough tyre temp. They sort of over-egged that a little bit, but it is true. You can't get the true performance from a car until you've got enough brakes temp, because the brakes is actually where you get your tyre temp from.
Well, I've got more balls than you, so I would 100% get the tyres on.
No one doubts
I'm
that.
crashing. 100% I'm crashing.
Your accident bill would be bigger.
Yeah, exactly. But it'd be faster before you had that accident.
Yeah.
I'd be really slow, but I wouldn't crash anything.
But yeah, no, Formula 3 car, I'm confident you guys would get pretty comfortable with it. They've got a manual clutch. They're not on the paddles, or at least were when I was doing it. So, and they're quite stiff, so you can still probably have 2 or 3 times. Then once you're under your way, you'd absolutely love it. And they are just still to this day fantastic.
And what's the real difference for people that don't know between like a fast tin top car, almost like a touring car, to a single seater? We'll start with an F3 comparison, for instance.
Okay, so let's compare an F3 car to like my brother's touring car. The touring car is probably double the weight, very heavy, very little aerodynamics, and most of the time touring cars are front wheel drive. Single seater weighs probably half that. That's sort of like 600, 700, 800 kilos. So power to weight is very different.
Yeah. Then
you've got the aerodynamics, and that is where your grip comes from. So the faster you go, the more downforce you have.
Yeah.
So then you brake later into the corner very hard. I mean, you're going quicker, so you can brake harder. But then as soon as you start slowing down, you've then got to come off the brake pedal.
Yeah. So try and explain, and it's really hard to explain. But with a race car, it's not like a normal road ABS car where you just hit the brake and the car does it for you.
Yeah.
With a race car, you really bang the brakes, don't you? And then you bleed off them. Is that right?
100%. Pretty much any racing car you ever drive, you want to hit it as hard as you physically can with your left leg on the initial brake pressure, and then instantly start to come off. So on like a data curve, it would be like straight up to maximum pressure, and then they call it the ski slope. Then you want to, if you can make your ski slope perfectly smooth, that's the sign of a really good driver. If it's jumping all around, it could be because the car's locking up and they're trying to, manually ABS it. But some drivers are just a little bit shaky. They're coming off, have I got enough grip? The art is going up, massive peak, and then come down.
So smooth and fast, just like anything, right?
Smooth and fast. Yeah. Smooth is usually always the fastest way because it just doesn't unsettle the car.
Yeah.
So yeah, Formula 3 car, they'll be so much quicker in the corners. Maybe not down the straights. They haven't got a huge amount of power.
What is the horsepower? What sort of horsepower? 300.
You're asking
Put him on the,
This is where it
on the
gets
spot now.
Never ask a racing driver a technical question. Half the time I couldn't even
some
tell you
horsepower.
I never know what engine I've got behind me half the time.
I'll save you, Max. Yeah. So, because we've got to a point which I think is super interesting and definitely the start of like proper racing now. There'll be a lot of people watching who either are trying to get into racing or maybe have kids coming up that they want to try and get into racing. When I was racing, Max.
Here we go.
When God was a boy.
Yeah. So I think you might know better than me. I went for a test day. Was it Formula TKM karts or
TKM? Yeah, that's what I did.
Hello. So did I for a test day. Just therefore, look at me.
Are they the quick cars?
They're two-stroke. They're the proper ones. You have to lift them and then drop them, and then they'll get going.
And are these the really fast ones that if you're not careful, you're going to do your ribs?
I mean, you can do ribs in anything, really. If you get a nasty knock or you hit a curb badly, like the seat sort of stops here, you can pretty much do it. But yeah, when you get to proper karting, especially when you go down to southern Italy, where the tyre grip is so high. I would do sort of international kart events. They'd take shovels out in the evening and shovel the rubber off the track.
Do they?
Wow.
Because it was making like a ski slope around the hairpins.
Oh my God.
And if you went into the corner, you had to brake in before the corner and then be full throttle through the corner, because if you went in a little bit half-assed, and you weren't enough on the throttle, it would like pick up and drivers were getting flung out the cars. You've got to be on the power.
Fire you off.
Yeah, on the power, which sort of breaks the traction and keeps it low. But if you come off the throttle, it just wants to pick up.
Yeah.
So when I did that test, I think they quoted me something like 25 grand to go and do the next season, whatever it was. I say my memory's a little hazy because I wasn't doing it. I wasn't a pro, and I didn't go ahead. Or paying. Thanks, Mum and Dad.
No, to be fair,
even though they pay for school instead. But
that was probably about right at the time.
Yeah. So when we get to F3 level, and we talk about this, or we hear about this a lot, I think, the money that it costs to go racing. So you are lucky enough to find a seat in F3. Have you started to think about sponsorship? Do you have people helping you with that? Where does that come from to sort of aid pushing you forward?
Yeah, so you definitely need, unless you're on like a Red Bull scheme, but most of the time Red Bull don't pick drivers up until they're already at that sort of level. So you need, again, family money, or you need a sponsor that really sort of believes in you. Half the time it's a combination of the two. It was a combination of the two with myself. I had family, and then I had also a sponsor, especially in Formula 3. I had Aon, which is on the Man U shirt. That was and then went on to the McLaren. So they was trying to get into the motorsport scene. And then you've got to prove yourself. But it is a lot to do with, being at the right place, knowing the right people, like anything in life, knowing people.
Who you know, not what you know.
A lot of the time that is true.
Yeah.
But you've also got to prove yourself. When I got to Formula 1, I got a lot of grief from our, wealthy family. Yeah, fine. But there's people out there now in Formula 1 that are there because, they've got wealthy families, but they've got podiums. I won...
Well, not Mazepin.
Thank God, not him. But I know exactly who you're talking about.
But you do hear it, and I'm like, I'll listen to their grief.
Look, shut up. Listen to Max talk, for God's sake.
But it's the same back in the day. Sterling Moss's family bought the Formula 1 team that he raced for. It won't ever change, unfortunately.
Of course. It's an expensive thing to go and do.
You still got to have the skill to get there. And I won, at the time it was GP2, it's now Formula 2. I finished 4th in the championship, put it on pole multiple times, won multiple races. You don't do that without the skill. So then I felt, and the timing for me worked perfectly. I won my... it was my first GP2 race. The weekend I was announced to be Marussia's reserve driver. And then I went on to be their race driver. So it all fell into place perfectly for me.
So you want to say something, Tony?
Yeah, so I want to quickly pick up on the F2. So what's the step up from F3 to F2? And then are they all like, because we know in F1 they can be different, the cars, and we'll pick up on that. But the F2 cars, are they all like the same?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So all junior formulas, the cars are the same. You can get a good team which has better sort of dampers, or they know how to, they try and set up exactly that. Some teams are better at working out the tiniest of little details, down to sort of like taping the undersides of the bodywork to cover up the vents, which actually reduces your drag and finds you 2 or 3/10 lap. I mean, that in the junior formulas, 3/10 is huge.
Yeah.
So all these little gains, the better teams find out more than the worser teams. And so, yeah, you've all got the same machinery. And that's sort of the reason why people love IndyCar, where I've come from, is everyone's got the same car. You can change dampers, which makes a lot of difference in IndyCar. And there's 2 different engine manufacturers, but in general terms, everyone's got the same bit of kit. I think for years, people struggle with Formula 1, where you can only really compare a driver to his teammate because it's so varied. Now, luckily, the last few years, Formula 1's definitely getting better for that. And now we're seeing sort of drivers, compete against other teams, which is great to see. And especially this year, now with the ground effects, I think Formula 1's the best that I've ever known in my lifetime.
Yeah, first 2 races of the season, super exciting. So you're in Formula 3, you've just turned 16. I guess we're sort of progressing through Formula 2 and stuff like that. So you're approaching road driving age, right? So for me, a frustrated want-to-be racing driver, I'm immediately looking at road cars being like, well, I just need to drive on the road as quickly as possible. As we found out in a recent episode, Tony had been on the road for about 6 years at this stage because he was driving at 9 years old around his estate.
Yeah.
But if you're racing, and I guess you're devoted to racing at this point, because it's serious, Formula 3, Formula 2, you've got a lot of pressure from sponsors, it's competitive. Is there a part of your brain which is thinking about road cars? Do you care about road cars, or is that not really on your mind?
No, absolutely, they go hand in hand, as I said earlier, because you're in a motorsport paddock. I mean, I used to spend so much time in Brands Hatch, which is just around the corner from here. And you wouldn't go into the paddock without seeing at the time the latest M5 or that made a nice noise, or the latest 911. Like it's sort of, they go together.
They do.
And so, yeah, I've always been hugely passionate about road cars, and even more so now about the classics. I just love the feeling and the driving sensation and purity that you get from a classic, because you can feel everything that's going on.
So, big question then. What was your first road car?
My first road car was a Mini Cooper S.
Lovely.
Yeah, and it actually had the
Supercharged one.
at the top. No, it was the model after that. So that was like the early 2000s. This was like 2007.
So it's the
GP07PXS was the number plate. There you go. Yeah. So it was an 07. There you go. It was an 07, but I believe at the time, and this is what the dealership told me, it was Vine's Red Hill.
This is a lie coming.
I know. I think at the
500
time,
horsepower.
there was a period where you couldn't buy a Cooper Works. You had to buy the Cooper S and then get the Works kit added.
Yeah.
So it was one of those ones, and it was a principal dealer's car. I'd done like 4,000 miles at the time. And then about a year later, I stepped up and sold that and put in some more of my own money because my family bought the first car. And I put a bit more money in and bought a brand new John Cooper Works, because at the time, 2011, you could buy just a full-on Works. And I've still got that car to this day.
Have
No
you?
way.
Absolutely love it. I've heard so many people, my sort of family, parents' generation, I wish I hadn't sold my first car. And so I've stuck to that.
That's
and
awesome.
I think
Really?
to
That's
say,
awesome. I have to
it
say,
gives
yeah.
me more satisfaction than probably any other car I own. And today, my wife dailies it. She absolutely loves it.
That's brilliant.
It's done 35,000 miles from new. I bought it new in 2011. And I constantly just sort of get a new little carbon rear spoiler, or just do it up as time goes on, just to keep it looking fresh.
So
Very
would you, when you had that car and at that age, because I'm just trying to correlate, what's it like to be a racing driver at that age to me, a frustrated or wannabe racing driver, or Tony, a lunatic on a housing estate. Would you drive to race weekends in that car? Would you take yourself on road trips when racing on the off season and stuff? Like, as I say, what was your on-road experience compared to the track experience when it comes to cars?
Discipline, I think, is the main thing. I'll go testing I was testing Formula 3 cars. I said at like 15 and 16, they're doing 150, 60 miles an hour, and I still didn't have a road license. But eventually I got my license at 17, and I could drive my Mini back from Snet, and I was, driving around the M25. And I had to be really disciplined. You come out the gates of any racetrack in the UK having done 150 all day, and then you've got to sit at like 60, a national speed limit. That's the hardest part. But touch wood, I was always quite disciplined, and I was lucky that I got to vent my sort of testosterone out on the racetrack when a lot of younger people didn't, and that's when they got 6 points, lost their license in the first 2 years. And
well, racing drivers in general, I think they are a lot more calmer and chilled on the road for that reason. I think they get their kicks on the racetrack.
Yeah.
So that completely goes hand in hand. And
didn't go hand in hand with my brother. He was the opposite. I used to hate getting in the passenger seat with him on the road.
Interesting.
But that's probably because the touring car was too similar to an actual road car.
Well, yeah, because he was at the time. He was racing for Vauxhall, and it was the Astra VXR. And he had the Honda Civic Type Rs. He raced all of those hot hatches. And at the time, he was only 22, 23. He would drive them on the road like he was literally lights out. And he had Jason Plato behind and Matt Neal in front. And I was like, no, there's a bus in front. And there's a moped behind.
Outrageous. Okay, so then let's move on a little bit. What came I don't know how I want to ask this. I'm going to say what came first. Basically, the first sort of sports or supercar, would you say, or Formula One?
Formula One.
Okay, so let's start with Formula One.
Yeah.
So you already mentioned you were doing well in Formula 2 or GP2 at the time. Got announced as the Marussia reserve driver. You had done some test work. Was it with Force India or something before that?
Someone's been looking at Wikipedia.
Hello, cheeky.
Yeah, it was the first time.
Did you look?
I did look, yeah.
Well done,
I had to
mate.
remind myself.
First time I ever drove a Formula One car was a Force India car at Kemble Airfield in the Cotswolds.
That's right next to my
Crash?
parents.
No,
That's right next to my
luckily
parents.
not.
No
I don't
crash?
think I would have ever got to Formula One if I crashed on an airfield.
Right,
But
well.
yeah, no, that didn't happen. But I did scare the living shit out of myself. It was unbelievable. And at the time, I'd been racing GP2 for 3 years. I mean, they're not a million miles off a Formula One car. But I got told to just go out, and they had like basically different cruise control speeds, like, funny cruise controls. Like first one was 100 miles an hour, then it was like 130, and then like 170, and you'd have to just go full throttle until it got to that speed, and then it would just keep you at that speed, and all the aero sensor they would have would be working out what the actual aerodynamics of the car was doing compared to the wind tunnel, because they have to correlate it. And I could not get my head around how fast this Force India was. The noise was just mental. It was so pure. It was like a computer game. It just went straight up.
What engine would it be? V8 at that point?
It was V8, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And it had the year after that, it had the blown diffuser, because I actually test drove. It had the blown diffuser on it.
Okay.
And that thing was mad. I drove that around Abu Dhabi. You would come off the throttle, but the engine would still keep going at 100 RPM or 100 percent, because it was basically just putting the exhaust fumes through the underside of the car to create airflow, which gave you downforce.
So no drive to the wheels, but
no
still,
drive, but massive amounts of airflow under the car to give you downforce. You go down to like a chicane at like 70 miles an hour. The engine, you'd think the throttle was stuck on, but you had loads of downforce because of the way the exhaust fumes are being used as a blown diffuser.
What is the real fundamental difference between F2 and F1? Did you get in the F1 car and think, flipping hell, this is another level?
Yeah, so when I first drove that four-cylinder at Kemble on the straight line test, I knew I was doing the young driver test for them at Abu Dhabi. And I don't know why, I didn't think about Abu Dhabi. I just thought about Monaco. And I was thinking, how on earth am I going to ever drive something like this around the streets of Monaco? Like, I don't get how...
It's a joke.
It was literally a jet fighter.
Yeah, okay.
Was it?
On the ground. I was like, how is this even possible? And since then, Formula 1 cars are probably 7 or 8 seconds lap faster.
Which is unbelievable.
So I look at Formula 1 cars now and think, how is that even possible? Because when I think the fastest time I ever did around Silverstone was a 1:35, and Lewis last year was 1:26.
He was, yeah.
I mean, that is serious speed.
Mind-boggling.
And he does it for 57 laps.
Yeah.
By the way, you do have Lewis Hamilton's biggest fan sitting in between.
No. Listen,
yes.
It's not just like, I just appreciate greatness.
Yeah.
So you have to hold your hand. I don't particularly...
That's why you're such a good friend of mine, isn't it? You appreciate my greatness.
I don't appreciate your hair.
But yeah, I thought, how on earth am I going to get around the streets of Monaco? But you very quickly, like going through the ranks. I remember you were talking about TChem earlier. The one after that was a thing called JICA, which is Junior ICA, and then the one above that was ICA. I remember driving a JICA for the first time thinking, wow, this is mad. Like, I'm just holding on for dear life.
How quickly, so get to the young drivers test then, how many laps in were you like, okay, I'm on top of this now? Like, it's no longer just like, whoa, I know what I'm doing.
Probably 6 or 7.
Okay.
And you know what the coolest thing was? That was the only time that I've ever been on track with Michael Schumacher, which for me, he was my idol as a kid. Because at the time, that was sort of, he was the winning red car when I was a kid, and I was like, I want to support that. What is that? It's Ferrari.
I want to be like him.
I want to be like him.
Yeah.
And he was like, Senna brought a difference to Formula 1, and then I think Schumacher was the next one to bring a difference. Like, Senna did bring fitness, but like Schumacher brought the whole sort of package together. So that's who I aspired to be. And it was just very weird. Obviously, he flew past me. Like, I was sitting there. He was in the Mercedes.
Did he really?
Yeah, I was in the four-cylinder, which obviously wasn't as quick. But it was fantastic to be around him and follow him for a few laps. And it was a real sort of pinch me moment that I was on track with such, at the time, 7-time world champion.
Greatness.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the real moment. Wow, I've made this, but then you've got to concentrate because the corner's coming up.
Yeah, I was going to say. So when you're following someone like Schumacher, and even in Formula 1 or any level, are you genuinely like, oh, that's interesting that he turned in there? Like, can you read stuff from the car from behind, or are you just a bit like, oh God, see you, mate?
Yeah, no, everyone has a different driving style. Some are aggressive, some are smooth. The thing I find fascinating about driving styles is you look at Verstappen's karting style, it's the same to his racing style. You look at Lewis's driving style from karting, it's the same now. Lewis is really smooth, methodical, not too risky with his overtakes. Verstappen, on the other hand, is like super aggressive, wired.
I'm coming.
Yeah, watch out. I'm not stopping. So that's what I find fascinating. And I've always been quite smooth and sort of methodical, and that's the way I still am to this day. I think some people probably think I miss opportunities, but then I set a record in Formula 1, which in 70 years of Formula 1
hasn't been beaten,
hasn't ever
What's
been
that
beaten.
then? Really?
Oh, great for this. You're like this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a claim to fame, but I'm the only rookie to ever finish every single race in their rookie year.
Brilliant.
But I genuinely actually think that's a pretty amazing record.
Another thing I think is amazing about that is that was a Marussia, which was a very small budget compared to like Mercedes, Red Bull. So usually those kind of teams have reliability issues. We didn't break down once. I did a full season, and then I went on to do a following year, and that was 2013. In 2014, I think I got all the way to the Canadian Grand Prix where me and my teammate Jules came together and ended up in the wall. But yeah,
really?
I took
up until then.
Up until then, it was great. And that took
what was all that about? What happened there then?
25 Grand Prix without a DNF, I think it was, or 26. Someone's going to write on this.
Yeah,
someone
who'll know the exact number.
Yeah.
But
who fired you into the wall? What was all that about?
We did have a big heated discussion about it. We had a
tete.
Yeah. I still think I was on the inside. He pinched me up onto the curb. But then because he pinched me onto the curb, I came off the curb and hit him. It was a racing incident, but we both didn't want to let each other pass.
You couldn't agree.
Who was quicker out of the two of you?
Well, I'd qualified in front of him that day in Montreal, and so I was desperate to keep him behind, because if you can keep a car behind the first 2 or 3 laps, it then makes the race a lot easier. And it was, I didn't out-qualify Jules a lot of the time because he was destined for great things. He was going to be in the Ferrari the following year. He probably out-qualified me 4-1 or 5-1. But that day I just had a really good qualifying in Montreal. Thought I've got to keep him behind me. And he got alongside me and he pinched me on the curb, and then I slid off the curb, and the rest is history.
Big crash.
I love the fact that you still remember it like so clearly. Okay, so as a mega fan, my question is, how and why Marussia, right? So you're coming up through the ranks, you're doing well in Formula 2, you've been building towards Formula 1, Schumacher's your dream, etc. Is that the first door that opened, and therefore you're like, I want to get into F1? Was there anyone giving you advice about your strategy, your long-term plan? Because I'm sitting here going, well, I know you're not going to be qualifying in the top 10 every weekend. It's a Marussia.
Yeah.
But as you say, Jules made his mark, was destined for greatness. We've seen it over the years. You still put in some solid results. So yeah, where was your mindset going into that?
An opportunity to get to Formula 1, you take it. And the door had sort of been opened a little bit for me to be reserve driver, and that you're sort of halfway there at that point. And at the time, there might have been something at Williams, but it just sort of worked better for Marussia. And I was actually driving a GP2 car with Marussia down the side, so there was already like a connection there. It's very rare you come out of a junior Formula and get straight into a great seat. I know most of the time Red Bull drivers start in sort of Toro Rosso, which is at least midfield, and then they work their way up. But Schumacher started in one of the bottom teams. A lot of people do, and just work their way up. There was an opening there. It's amazing what hindsight is. I was talking to someone about this the other day. I think if I'd done GP2 for another year, I probably would have won the championship. But then I don't think there would have been an opening to Formula 1, and I don't know which one I would have wanted more. It'd be great because I'd never won a championship. I've finished second, third, fourths, but I've never won one. But then I don't know what... I think I can't look back in my F1 times and regret it because I was there. I think my top result was 13th. I set some records. I met some amazing people, and then I went on to do Le Mans and IndyCar. That might not have happened if I didn't have taken the opening. So I think... hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I'm very fortunate to do what I've done.
I would have 100% done F1.
Same.
100%. It's the pinnacle, mate.
It is.
Yeah. Without sounding like a dick, you're here because you drove Formula 1. I mean, you're an ex-Formula 1 driver.
Yeah. Not because I've got a great chat.
No, definitely not, mate. It has nothing to do with it. Well, we're going to come on to the fact the second reason is your road car stories, but
which are very cool.
Which are very, very cool.
Well, you've made me realise my decision was the right one then.
Yeah,
sure.
100%. And so, as you said, let's segue there at that point. So, you're now in Formula 1, right? You're a Formula 1 driver. What age were you? So
I was 21 at the Melbourne Grand Prix in 2013.
Okay, so 21.
Which was young at the time. I think Jensen was like 19, late 19, but then, I know, Verstappen and all these people come in and just make us all look like granddads.
Yeah, of course. So what does it mean for you in your life? Do you suddenly feel completely different? You're like, oh my God, I'm a Formula 1 star. You're being flown around the world. Like, as I say, still, where are we at with road cars? Are you still in the Mini Cooper? Like, what's...
that is a good question. Yeah, still... No, so I was still in my Mini John Cooper Works that I bought. And then when I got to Formula 1, things start being open doors. And, Marussia, they did have a road car, actually. It never really I never saw one on the road. I saw it in a showroom in Monaco.
I think it was a slightly strange thing.
That mostly on fire.
It looked like a sort of Batmobile a little bit.
Was it?
But yeah, no, I got a deal at the time. Mercedes VIP were doing a deal from Brooklands where you could get... I got a C63, brand spanking new, no deposit, £280 a month. For 12 months, gave the key back.
Yeah.
I was like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I snapped that up. So I had a C63 then at that point. Obviously kept my Mini, and I'm glad I did do that. So yeah, that was my daily. And then I think it was towards the end of my first year in Formula 1, a good friend of mine's Paul Jack and Elliott owns Romans, and I had enough money. It wasn't much. I think I had 55 grand, which is obviously a lot of money, but it wasn't enough to go out and buy the things that I was sort of picturing. And I'd always, because of my father, he's always had a passion about old Ferraris and sort of Porsches. There was, at the time, you could pick up a 355 for that sort of money.
Nice.
And I went down to a dealership near Shipblake, down near Henley-on-Thames. I can't even remember what the dealership was called now. And I test drove, and I thought, this is nice. It had the typical 2-bit exhaust, blew your ears out.
They sound cool, don't they?
They sound cool, but it was a little bit ropey, and I'm a perfectionist. I like things looking just... if it's old, it's got to be restored.
Are you sorry? Tony, you're going to be kicked off this podcast soon. Fresh from an 8-month restoration. How's that RS5 that's been here for 7 months, mate?
Well, it's in better condition than that whole thing that you've
Not
got.
sure, it's covered in dust and rust. Anyway, sorry, Max, what were you saying?
So I test drove that, wasn't 100% sure, and I went and saw Paul, and he was like, "Oh, why don't you put that down as a deposit?" Which is not at the time what I was thinking. I was thinking that's the amount of money I've got. I don't want to spend more than that. But he typically got the finance figures
he's a real
sorted out.
Yeah, he's well done.
And there was a 430 Scuderia, right-hand drive, no stripes. I don't like stripes. So I was like, what the figures? And the figures came out really decent because the residuals on it are pretty good. So,
all Ferraris residuals are unbelievable.
Yeah. So I put that deposit down and was paying, it wasn't a huge amount per month. But then I didn't want to be, people were looking at me because I got to Formula One, and I didn't want to be seen for that young kid driving around in a Ferrari. So I went out and bought 2 New York Yankees caps, put them in the passenger seat of the car. So whenever I was driving, I'd put one on. Or if my girlfriend, who's now my wife, we've been together for 15 years, was with me, we'd both put these baseball caps on, and we would not drive to London. I still to this day don't get why people drive supercars to London. Go out towards Goodwood, head south, get some nice roads. And just went for nice drives, pub lunches and stuff, and tried to sort of be as incognito as we could.
See, but I kind of love this. I mean, obviously, I totally get where you're coming from, and I understand it. But then there's also me that's going, as a Formula One driver, he's there, this scud, like cruising around. Like there's so much of it which I think should be celebrated. And I think that's almost the Britishness of it, right? Yeah. I guess, especially with your experience in IndyCar, the American attitude of like success and well done you and you've achieved. You've got to where you've been aiming to get to. Go fine. You're not necessarily winning races or championships in Formula One, but you've achieved a boyhood dream, and you've now gone out and bought a Ferrari supercar. It is a very British thing in us to be like, but I don't really want anyone to know that I'm driving around in this.
I was always scared of the Daily Mail. That's why I just didn't want to be seen in it. So I was like trying to stay out of it, and luckily I did, and it worked. So I'm glad I did do that. And also I wanted, I'd never changed when I went to Formula One. I always had my wife, who at the time was my girlfriend. We got together in early 2009. I didn't get to Formula One until 2013. And so she's been with me my whole sort of professional career.
So you kept yourself grounded, is what you're trying to say?
Trying to, but people will probably take the piss out of me because I bought a Ferrari trying to stay grounded. But I tried my best.
Super in touch with the people with my scud. Yeah.
But lots of people, not just F1. There's lots of successful people, mate, that buy Ferraris in their early 20s. They come from banks or
YouTube.
Maybe American ones for sure, not UK ones.
Hey, I got my 360 when I was 28.
Brilliant, mate.
Well
Cool story.
I'd made it. Okay, so just to finish off the sort of Formula One side of it, so there you are, you're competing as not the most competitive car. In layman's terms, because we mentioned it before we started recording, this whole new audience for Formula One, right? We're seeing it here on the podcast, we see it on Twitter, we see it on social media. People who Drive Survivors opened the world of Formula One too. What is it like as a racing driver in an uncompetitive car? Like, is that impossible to drive? Are you just slow? What's the mindset or motivation? Like, what does that actually feel like or mean to you?
I mean, it's still unbelievably fast. It's amazing to be on the circus of Formula One, as I call it, I remember the first time I got interviewed by Martin Brundle was on his grid walk. It only happened once, but it was at Spa. And I actually said, I can't believe this is happening, because everyone's watched his grid walks. And they actually came to the back of the grid, because we're always at the back, and interviewed me and said, how's it going? So I think me and Jules, it was the first time we both got through to Q2, because it was wet, and we sort of just went to town. Because that's the thing, when it's wet in a junior team, or a worse team, there's a bit of a point to prove. And that does more often not happen. They take more risks. And me and Jules just went for it, and we both got through to Q2. So I think that's why Martin came down and spoke to us. But in general, being in a backfield Formula One car, you're just grinding. You're working hard. Like as I said, I had a very, very challenging teammate. And he was very, very good. So I had to be at the top of my game. I tried to be fitter than him. I had a really good off seasons to do a lot of simulator work and try and get in the zone. But you're just trying to, prove yourself. Is it more sketchy? Yeah, the cars have less downforce, so they move around more. I think we learnt that last weekend in Saudi. Yeah. It's always the sort of back running cars that are hitting the wall, because they sort of hit the curb and they've got less downforce and they snap quicker than the Red Bull does or the Mercedes does. So there's a little bit of that. But it's just trying to stay disciplined, keep your nose clean. And that's the other thing. There are crashes, and most of the time, if you keep yourself clean, you'll pick up. You haven't got the speed to overtake these cars, but you have got the speed to finish the race. So if you can let them crash off, you're going to have a good result.
And what is the real difference between a a back running car to a front running car in terms of percentage. We all know that to win a championship or to win a race, you've got to have a quick car, right?
Yeah.
You're dependent on your machine. But how much is it machine and driver? Because when you if you're on the F1 grid, are all the drivers the same, or are the drivers the top drivers? Are they in the top cars because they are the top drivers?
100%. That is the reason.
That's what I thought.
And, as you were going on about Lewis earlier, he is greatness, and there's a reason he is a 7 times champion, is because he has always been better than his teammates, so he's got himself into that seat, which is then the best seat in the house to win the championships. Unfortunately for him this year, the car's not looking as good. And so it's near on impossible for him to probably win the championship unless Mercedes start turning things around. I know it's early, but that's sort of the way it's looking. So to go back to what the difference is, I would say it's probably 90% machinery, 10% driver.
Yeah.
To a point. I mean, that last bit, I'd say the last 4 to 5 tenths is the driver, which is a lot. But if Lewis's car's 3 seconds a lap slower at certain races this year, he's not going to win the race.
What does someone like Lewis or Max and the real top, because they are I personally think from a sofa fan, they're the best 2 drivers on the grid, as in out and out best drivers. I know they got the best cars, but I think they are the best drivers. What do they do differently to drivers further back down the grid?
Why is Verstappen beating Perez? Is what you're trying to ask? Or?
Yeah, well, no. Why are they? What do they do different? Why are they better than the rest? Because you're all F1 drivers.
Some of it's natural ability, some of it's determination, and some of it's want. And I think Verstappen wants it. I think the reason why Verstappen won the championship last year, for me, it looked like he wanted it more in those closing few races. If there was half a car, he would go for it. He looked absolutely like he was destined to win that championship.
Apart from he shouldn't have won it, but
don't start.
I'm completely on the fence with that. Let's not go into it because that goes on forever. But he wanted it more, and sometimes life isn't fair. But he looked like he wanted it more, and that's sort of, I think it was probably the right result in the end. But Lewis got mugged at the same time. It's unfair. But yeah, it's a matter of all those different elements. I think the thing that's changed since I did it, simulators were around, but you definitely didn't have them in your house, and if they were in your house, it was like a PlayStation wheel. Now you can get a very, very good simulator in your house. But I think like Max has spent his life on iRacing, and yes, iRacing isn't comparable, and he still does now.
Yeah.
But those little bits of racecraft and like technique, as I was saying earlier, hard braking and coming off, his is probably like silky smooth compared to some of the other drives, and those little bits all add up. And Lando, for example, I think Lando's that famous 10,000 hour rule. He has done 10,000 hours on a simulator. Probably in his life, and he was also out testing multiple times. So it's his has come with just time and time and time on track compared to other people.
And we've seen this year in particular, obviously Ferrari come back to the fore, and obviously we got his mate Leclerc, who's right up with Max. In terms of a driver, is he of a similar standard to Max, do you think? Or do you still think that Max is probably a little bit, a level up?
I think they're pretty close. I mean, Max probably has that little bit of aggression over Leclerc, but then there's times last year where I think Verstappen was losing points because there was too much aggression. Like Silverstone, I felt like, actually, to be fair, that Silver one's a bad example. I think Lewis actually missed his apex, which then sort of took out Max. But there's some times where if you're too aggressive, you end up crashing and then you lose points. Leclerc's probably on that safer side, but you're better off getting 20 points than not getting none at all. So
like you were saying earlier, you played that sort of slightly safer bet in some of your driving, which got you that strange record, but actually quite an impressive one.
Yes, the ideal way to win a championship is finish every race. You're making it hard if you're not finishing every race because you're literally just gifting points to other people.
Consistency
is key, yeah.
So you had your first year with Mauricio, the second year obviously a bit of a disaster for multiple reasons, and ending in pretty unfortunate circumstances. But what did that mean for you in F1? Because I guess it was a bit of a shock with how the sort of all ended up. But was there ever sort of desire or discussions to keep going, or were you a little bit ready to move on to the next thing?
The ending was a bit tragic. Obviously, Jules had his accident, which was the beginning of the end. I sort of knew that whole 2014 the team was on the ropes, and I sort of knew more of what was going on than a lot of people working there, which made it difficult. I had this sort of stress of knowing what was going on to knowing pretty much every race in 2014 I thought was going to be my last race.
Oh, really?
But we actually got a long way through the year. And then the race after Jules's accident in Russia, my car broke down. And then after that, it came to an end.
You just run out of cash.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's the moral of the story. It just ran out, which happens to a lot of teams, especially without a big sponsor. I mean, they didn't really have. They had sponsors, but not like your typical Petronas, which is pretty much funding the lot. So that's how it came to an end. And so then I started looking. A lot of people have always said Le Mans racing suits my style because finishing is key. I'm great on long runs. I might not have the aggression necessarily for the short races for overtaking, but Le Mans about playing the long game, and you've got to bring the car home, or you're not gonna win it. So I wanted to try and do that. At the time, Nissan had an opening to do their LMP1 car, which I don't know if you remember it, but it was front wheel drive, so it had huge front tyres, but tiny little rear tyres because it was front wheel drive.
I think I do remember it.
And they spent a absolute packet Nissan on that project, and it was a complete flop, unfortunately.
Do you know the figures? What sort of money did it cost to do Le Mans in that respect?
Hundreds of millions, surely.
It wasn't hundreds, but it was well into the tens. For pretty much, we only did one race, I think.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't a season. It wasn't a.
No, it was meant to be a season, but we missed the first race because it just wasn't ready. And I think Le Mans was our first race, and I was in one car. We got to 23 hours, and it didn't finish. One did get to the end. But then, 23
hours and you broke down?
Yeah, but it didn't do 23 hours. We were in the pits for about 5 of it. So, yeah, we would have finished a 24-hour race, but only been on track for probably 18 of it if we did get to the end. So, yeah, that was unfortunate. But at the time, I was also racing Indy Lights in America, knowing that IndyCar was probably quite a good place for me. And it is for a lot of people that come out of Formula 1 because the racing's fairer. I love American tracks. They're very much like the British tracks, like Alton Park, Brands Hatch. They're like grass, white line, or track, white line and grass, and then
crash.
Yeah, crash.
Tony's favourite.
But a lot of these Tilke circuits, it's like, oversteer, I'll just cut the corner, and there's no penalty. And that's why we have so many of these F1 races last year were spoiled by someone cutting a corner.
Track limits.
You shouldn't, if you cut your corner, you should have loads of gravel in your side pod, and you're cleaning your tyres, and that's your penalty. But now there's no penalty. You have to argue what the penalty should be. So I love the American tracks, and so I did Indy Lights for not a full season because I missed some for this Le Mans project, but I won, weirdly, my first and only race I won in Indy Lights was on an oval, and it was also the day that Jules passed away, which was, I don't know why, it's just probably one of those things. So I sort of denoted, or what's the word? I sort of gifted in the win for that.
Yeah. Devoted,
there you go. I'm very dyslexic. You read my mind.
Me too.
I deal with it weekly. With Tony.
It was on the tip of my tongue. So yeah, that was a special moment winning there, and then that was the feeder series to IndyCar. So I went on to do IndyCar for another 5 years, and actually this is my first year in 21 years I'm not racing.
So you have nothing
to race, nothing for lights out. Off we go this year. I want to do Le Mans next year. That's what I'm working towards. But I'm actually sort of enjoying it. I've got loads of other things going on in my life. I'm quite like sort of business orientated. So I've got car storage business. I've always wanted to start a property development company, but I've not had the time. So now I've got a bit more time to do that. And then I'm developing this McMurtry, which I don't know if you guys have heard about, but it's called a McMurtry Spearling.
It's like the little baby Batmobile thing.
Yeah. That nickname needs to.
You must have seen that.
No. With it.
Are you trying to shed the?
I don't know if they're trying to shed it, but everyone just calls it the Batmobile. But I don't care because Batman's bloody cool. And this thing is unbelievably fast. Like I cannot explain how fast this thing is. I was sort of
road car.
So you must have seen it. Was it a Festival of Speed they launched it?
Was at the Festival of Speed they launched it last year.
It literally looks like a baby miniature.
Went up the hill.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it went up the hill with the fan on to make the noise because electric cars are pretty quiet. But this fan is unbelievable. There's 2 fans behind you which are like 23,000 RPM. They're like a jet fighter.
To aid the cooling of the battery?
No, it's to suck air on a 1 meter squared skirt that sucks down to the floor on ceramic plates, and it sucks air out there at such a rate that it creates a vacuum and sucks it to the floor.
No way.
And we're creating tons of downforce at 0 miles an hour, right? Which on a racing car, you usually have to get 2 tons of downforce, depending on the car. You've probably got to be doing 150 miles an hour to get that amount of downforce. Wow. We can do it with me just turning a switch.
Really?
So this thing is like the thing. I've never sort of been into electric cars, but this year I'm finding fascinating.
Me too.
We're testing probably a day a week on average. And it's been a project now for 5 years. So Sir David McMurtry, who's a 82-year-old businessman.
He's funding it.
He's funding it. And he's very, very successful businessman. He's a billionaire. He's got plenty of cash to put into make this amazing project come to reality. And I met him for the first time a few months ago. His passion is always to have a very small road car. But obviously the best way to make a good road car is make a very fast race car and then detune it. So he's had some amazing engineers working on this car. And this is the first year of us testing it and seeing what it can do. We've been at Silverstone a few times, and we're within 10 seconds of the lap time that I did with an F1 car. And we've only done about 15 laps so far. I'm very confident that I can get it with probably close to my Marussia time.
So it's faster than a GT3 car by a mile.
Mate, I've got a footage that I'll show you after this, which makes a GT3 car, or works with pro drivers in it, a McLaren 720 GT3 look like it's actually sitting still.
But with what aim? What, do you want to go racing with this thing, or literally just for this road car?
So this is what everyone asked, and it was a bit of like
Can you order one? It's mad!
Yeah. So hopefully you will be able to order them. So the project is, hopefully next year we're going to make 20 track specials, which will then eventually be for people that just want to go unbelievably fast and scare the hell out of themselves.
Can we get him
on a track?
Can we go?
Is it single seater or two?
It's single seater.
Okay.
It's quite comfortable, but it's tight. You have to get through a door which opens up.
Cops is flat.
Cops isn't flat, but you get there doing like 200 miles an hour. Like, it's unbelievable. It's mind-blowingly fast. So yeah, it's a really exciting project, and we are hoping to take it up the hill at Goodwood this year. I don't know if it's all going to come together, but it'd be interesting to see what kind of time it could do. Because the other thing, it's not just the fan that makes it fast; it's electric, and it's got 1,000 horsepower. It weighs like less than 900 kilos. And I took it onto a runway the other day. I did 200 miles an hour, and it got there in just over 12 seconds. And that wasn't on full power.
Gosh.
It just goes like it's just unbelievable.
Now, without trying to get too philosophical here, or therapeutic, I suppose, we were obviously just talking about things that were your past and quite a long time ago now, the Formula One and things like that. But I feel like you've become more passionate and excited about what you're talking about just now than anything we've spoken about for the last 45 minutes.
I know, it's weird. I never thought I was into electric things, but I sort of get why they're unbelievably cool. And especially this thing, because most things are electric and they're just fast in a straight line. This thing's got the combination of the fan. And going back to the fan, you basically, as I was saying earlier, with a racing car, your downforce comes off as you slow down. So when you brake, you then start to come off the brake pedal. Well, on this, you just stay pushing as hard as you physically can until you want to go again, because the downforce never reduces. Your downforce at 200 miles an hour is the same at 0. And when they first turned this fan on, they did it on an old disused runway. It sucked the runway up.
Did it?
Yeah, because 2 tons, it just sucks the time up.
This thing sounds insane. Okay, so we got to stay in touch on that project, because it just sounds absolutely mad. But let's bring it back to the road car story, because we kind of left it off with the Scud back in the Marussia days. So rattle us through. Where did it go from? I assume you don't still have the Scud now.
No, I sold the Scud. What did I sell the Scud for? I sold the Scud.
Well, when we met, there was a 4-litre GT3 RS knocking around when we did that Brands Hatch day. I mean, that would have been a few years later.
That was my old man, so that's not mine.
Okay.
Good car.
Talking
lovely
road trips, I've only ever done 2 road trips, and they're both in Scotland, and I took that one year, and I took my 50th anniversary Porsche, which is one that I've bought eventually. But Scotland road trips, that's probably another conversation, but that is unbelievable roads around there. It's fantastic.
Apart from the fact they're full of stones, but yeah, they are amazing roads.
Need a bit of PPF.
They ruin your car, but
but the views are fantastic.
Yeah, amazing.
So yeah, where do I go from that? I sold the 430 Scud, and I also got a VIP order for the last 675 LT Spider.
Oh wow!
From McLaren Birmingham. I called them up saying I was desperate for it, and they said we've got one left, so I bought that.
Did you like that car?
Do you want to know the true story?
Absolutely. That's what we're here for. This is what this podcast is all about.
I never saw the car. So what happened is it got delivered. I ordered that. It was a December slot I got in December 2016, I think it was. And then it arrived when I was out doing the Indianapolis 500 in May. And when you're doing the Indy 500, they call it the month of May. You just manic for a month. So I was out there for probably 6 weeks usually. And it arrived when I was out there. And I bought it, without mentioning any names, one other person who's a dealer, and we flipped it for ridiculous profit.
Brilliant.
Within a day.
Well done.
Unbelievable profit. And we sold it to a guy, I won't say where it was, they sold it to someone who then ended up selling it to another very well-known dealer for like $100,000 hit within a year. Because that's what they had huge premiums, and then they hit a wall.
Yeah.
But the weirdest thing of this story...
They're stable now.
It ended up going through Tom Hartley Jr.'s hands, who sold it to a friend of mine who's big in the car world, probably watching this, who then sold it to a guy that lives in my local town. And a guy called me saying, I've got a 675 LT Spider to store. Is it arrived? I was like, That's my car.
No
That's my old
way.
First
car.
time I saw it was like 4.5 years or 5 years after.
Coming into your storage.
Coming to my storage
That's
unit.
unbelievable.
We should have given him some free storage, mate.
Yeah.
You've already had a chunk of money out of that car. You might
He
as well.
bought that well, and I still think they are a serious value for money.
We talk about it. It's the one and only McLaren that both of us desire
Yeah.
and think actually will continue to do well. And if you get one that works, it's a fantastic
best car they made.
It's the great. It's one of the last, and I think McLaren and Ferrari have the same issue. It's one of the last ones they made before they got ridiculously fast. McLaren inherently put understeer in the car, so you can rag it around Goodwood where most people go with them, and you just get a bit of push, but you feel very safe in it.
Yeah, true.
The Spider's cool because it's a hard top which doesn't look like a convertible, and then when you put it down, it's all the noise.
Absolutely. You can drop the rear window if you want to.
You pick up now, what, 190-ish, 200,
bit more
210?
than
I think the
210?
Spiders are a bit
Something
stronger.
They did,
yeah.
Lockdowns made everything go back up again, but amazing car. So I never saw that.
Okay.
And then I took the profit from that and selling my 430 16M into a delivery mileage left-hand drive 599 GTO.
Wait, you had a
We
16M?
spoke about. No,
Huh?
it was the Scud, wasn't it?
Yeah, Scud.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
a 16M.
No, Scud. But we spoke. I saw you when you just bought this GTO,
Yes.
and you were like, "I bought a delivery mileage GTO. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what to do with it."
So it was meant to be an investment. I wasn't going to use it. But annoyingly, that was 2016. There was a very toppy market then. And to this day, that's only one of two cars I've lost money on. I think
You
I've
paid
had
big money
14
for
or
that car.
15 cars. Yeah, I paid big money for it. In general, I sold that at the start of 2020, so lockdown. It was a 50k hit I took on it,
Fair enough.
which is a lot of money, but I've only lost on two cars. But I
lose
went
on
into
every car,
something
mate,
which was
don't
better because I realised that old cars are better. So I went
So this was the moment.
I did a direct swap with a guy that had a original 1974 Daytona right-hand drive, and he also gave me a bit of cash. So the actual difference wasn't overly different, but I didn't do too badly out of it. And I got into that, and I love old cars. But the Daytona, I'd never driven one, and actually when I drove it, it was too big, it was too heavy. I didn't want to pay to have the pad steering upgrade, and I just wasn't in love with it. And at the time, Paragon had been trying to sell this 2.7 RS Touring for quite a while. It ended up having up for like 10 months, and I thought, why is that not selling? I'd love that.
I've got a couple of cars like that here.
I was like, it's never going to happen, but I'd love that car. So anyway, I went down and saw Mark Sumpter at Paragon, and we sort of, weirdly, I wasn't expecting it, but sort of shook on a deal with a price that I was actually really happy with. But I said, look, I haven't got the cash at the moment. It's all tied up in this Daytona. He said, well, give me 12, you've got 12 weeks to, let's go ahead with it, but in 12 weeks time. So I put the Daytona up for sale. It just wasn't selling. And then I got a phone call saying it's sold on the 11th week. So then I went down on the 12th week and picked up the 2.7 RS. And that is going to be like my Mini. I will never sell that car because I've just never loved a car like it.
And that's what you've come in today.
That's what I came in today. It's power to it. I think it's like 210 horsepower. Doesn't weigh a huge amount, but it's really comfortable. It makes a nice noise, but it's not lairish. I mean, it's not like a head turner with these hot hatches now which like have fireworks coming out the back. It's just a nice old classic noise. You can take it anywhere. I haven't done a tour in it yet, so I want to take it up to the Highlands. Might have to put a bit of PPF on it though.
Yeah.
Says it'll
Have a
be
few
chips.
spare windscreens knocking around. But
Yeah, and that's how that sort of car story went.
So I mean, you're preaching to the converted here with how you sort of moved into the classics, and you're really doing classics. I'm here. I like the late 90s, early noughties stuff, but you're of an era that I do adore as well, but just can't quite afford. But if we think about it, apart from the Scud, I mean, the LT and the GTO, you didn't really drive them. I mean, they're two of the greatest, modern supercars, but you didn't really get a chance to drive them. Then you ended up in the classics. So now, are you at all tempted by newer stuff, or you're like, I'm 60s and 70s for life?
So now I'm very much just classics, but that was just one connection of cars. I've had other cars since, since
What have you had?
around those. So
Reel them off.
So after that, what else did I went in? So I've had a Defender. I've always been hugely passionate about Defenders ever since I was a kid. The old looking ones. I bought one new in late 2015 because they'd already announced they were going to stop production. So I managed to get one of the...
Was it green?
It was Keswick green.
Yeah,
Gorgeous
it
green.
was.
And I picked it up from Harwood's new at Gatwick or Crawley, I think it is, and instantly took it up to Twisted, who I'd been working with for like a year, just sort of trying to help them promote, because I just love Twisted. I think they're sort of the best at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So I took it up there. I didn't have loads done. I put the Twisted wheels on it. I put all the stainless steel bolts because they all rust to shit pretty quickly. I got the chassis protection because the chassis rust. So I got that done. Put the Racing Recaro seats in it. and some coloured mirrors to match. Not a huge upgrade, but that ended up being a 5-year project. So that was 2016. Then I went up every year and I had different things done. And the last year I went up there, which was 2020 during lockdown, luckily I was racing for Chevrolet in IndyCar, which is General Motors, and they make the LS3 block.
Oh my God.
So I got a free
LS3
block shipped over to the UK. Had it in storage for a while, but then I got it taken up to Twisted, and that's the LS3 block. They now use the LS1, but at the time they were putting the LS3 blocks in. So I got them to put the LS3 block in. You think it was nice and cheap because I got the block free. The blocks are actually pretty cheap compared to the overall package of putting one of those engines in. But I got a good rate, and you have to put a whole new auto box in there because it obviously had the manual. Which by putting the auto box in, you've got to put a whole new centre console, new ECU, new fuel lines, fuel pumps. It was a huge job. It took months. But it came back a flame-spitting V8 in a Defender.
Still got it?
Unbelievable.
No, so I sold that. I know. 5 years, and I never thought that was one of the things I said I'd never sell. Weirdly, I think I sort of ruined it by putting a V8 in it.
Oh, really?
It didn't feel like a Defender anymore.
Yeah,
it was amazingly fast.
In a straight line.
In a straight line.
Yeah.
And actually, to be fair, Twisted, I had the Twisted spring package on it. It was a bit stiffer, and it handled fairly well. The tyres are the worst thing. You're governed by the tyres, and those BF Goodrich mud trains are like a slick in the wet. You come to a roundabout and you'd literally just like be in all sorts of trouble. So yeah, I sold that. But the reason I sold that is as I said, I've got a property company. I'm very passionate about architecture, always have been. And I've always wanted to build a house. Now I thought it was going to happen in my 40s, but in lockdown when I was in America, I saw a house in my local area come up with a lakefront property. I didn't think they existed in where I was.
Sure.
When I saw it, and I just fell in love with the house. So I've then been selling cars left, right and centre and things to try and help fund this project, because I'm trying to build a house, as you know, in a time where labour's expensive and material rates are just ridiculous. So I had to sell my Pista as well, which I had.
Oh, wow.
What did you think about that?
Unbelievably fast. Like acceleration was the same as my IndyCar, if not more. Beautiful looking car. I think the Pista is one of the best looking Ferraris I've ever made.
From the back for sure.
Oh,
yeah, but even from the front with the dip and the little carbon vents, I think it's a beautiful looking car.
Beautiful. And you had a very nice spec, didn't you? It was like a dark blue with tan Alcantara.
Blue Tour de France with no stripes. It had Koya, which is like a tan Alcantara. Black wheels. I think the only thing I'd change now on it is I would have put silver wheels on it. I'm sort of going off black wheels.
Same.
I don't know if it's because I've hit my 30s, but I feel like an old man and I can't get black wheels.
I have black wheels. I can't do them.
Yeah. Beautiful car. I ended up selling that to another racing driver who's now just sold it through Macaris to Hong Kong. So I believe it's in Hong Kong now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I did love that. And it makes a lovely... I put a Novitec exhaust on it as well, which because they're not overly noisy.
No.
And it just creates a little bit more of a burble. But yeah, I got out of that. And I didn't get out of that because I didn't like it. I got out of that because I needed sort of money for this project. But since I've got out of it, I've just sort of fallen out of love for modern stuff. Like I just drive that Porsche now because I don't have anything else to drive, which is nice and exotic. And it just handles beautifully. It puts a smile on my face. People give you the thumbs up and try and let you out junctions because they appreciate it. When you're in the modern stuff, they're there with your camera phones waiting for you to, as you said, lose it in a Pista and then hit it in a wall. And they can't wait to get it on YouTube.
Exactly.
But a classic thing.
That's
people are there to appreciate it.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I was gonna ask, but I think you basically just answered it. You know, is there something in the fact that you're obviously, you know, especially like the prototype thing that you're driving around, you're driving insanely quick stuff through work, basically, that the desire to be in something quick on the road isn't there. But actually, we talk about it regularly on the podcast, don't we, Tony, that I think all of us, of a generation, okay, fine, maybe if you're 18, 19, 20, you still lust after SF90s and things like that.
Yeah.
But any of us sort of 30 plus, I think just don't feel the need or the desire for these super powerful, super quick cars. Whether you are a racing driver or just a normal person, it's just there's something more feeling in a slower car.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I'm lucky enough that I get to experience fast things, so I fully understand how someone who's been a successful businessman has now got enough money to go out and experience this speed. First thing they can do is go out and buy a GT3 RS or a Pista. I fully understand that because I've been lucky enough to sort of sense that. I think now, having seen that, I just prefer the classics, more of a driving experience. And I think long term, they're sort of a dying breed. And I'd love to know what's going to happen in 50 years' time. Where do we get our fuel from? I mean, that's a whole other conversation. I don't understand.
How are you going to fill up a car? I mean, because the thing is, synthetic or e-fuels or whatever must be a solution. We think that's going to be one route, but your car, 73 911, that's not going to take synthetic fuel. You won't. I mean, you might find some specialist who converts engines or whatever, but there's so much for us to
There's
figure
always
out.
a way, boys. Don't panic. Nothing's going to change immediately.
No, I agree.
It's not going to happen
It's a long
anytime
and slow
soon.
process.
And maybe not even in our lifetime. Not so much yours. You're a little bit younger than me, both of you, but mine. It's not going to happen.
That'll jump will see you out. You're near the end, aren't you?
Well, not really, mate. No, I'm 10 years older than you. But what I'm saying is, in 10, 15 years' time, nothing's going to change.
Yeah, no, I do agree.
We're still going to be the same.
Long journey ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so final two questions then. So you mentioned a lot that you sort of into your business. This is usually sort of Tony's thought process, but you mentioned the property and the car storage. At what point did you start engaging with that? At what point did you sort of not take one eye off the racing? Did you feel like you had to take one eye off the racing to get into the entrepreneur side, I guess, of what you do?
I've just always been passionate about business and sort of, making a sort of name for yourself in something which isn't sort of my sort of bread and butter. Racing is my bread and butter. But I've also been fairly switched on to know that being a professional, I call us athletes because everyone in sport is an athlete, career can't last forever. And it's fine if you're like a very, top Premiership footballer. You earn so much, you could just stop. And as long as you're smart with your money, you're fine. But I've never earned enough like that to sort of just stop, especially to live the life that I want. So I was like, right, however long I'm going to race for, another 5 years or maybe 1 year or 10 years, I need something to start paying my mortgage when I just stop racing. So I started my car storage business because it was a fairly easy thing to start up. I took a rent on a farm unit, stripped it out, made it very suitable for cars. And luckily, because I'm passionate about cars, I've got so many friends in the car world. Some clients are coming from far, but a lot of them are local. And it only is 30, 35 cars, that it just sort of makes sense. And I meet great people from it who are passionate about cars. And that's half the reason I'm getting into property is one of the clients from there I'm going into business with. And that wouldn't have ever happened if I hadn't have started my car storage business, which isn't overly profitable, but hopefully the property will be. And that all came from the car storage.
For sure. And someone always said to me a long time ago, if you want to be successful, surround yourself with successful people.
Yes.
And you'll become successful. So that sounds like what you're doing or what you've started to do, and it will just come natural. You've got a graft, obviously, but it will come, mate.
And I love watching Dragon's Den, and I love seeing sort of how to do it, how not to do it. And so I thought, right, there's no better way of learning than to start a business yourself. And so this is my first business that I've sort of started and run myself.
Yeah.
And it has taught me a lot of, how to do your tax returns and all that sort of jazz. It's just a good process to do if you want to go into business in the future. I
think it's a good mindset you had as well, as you say, sort of being aware of, what's next and, preparing yourself for a future. Okay, so final question, which we're going to make a tradition.
I just realised I haven't told you about another car.
Please.
Mercedes 190 SL, 1959. This is actually the coolest story.
You got that right now, or you had that?
No, I still got it. And that's another thing I can't sell because I wouldn't say it's my car. I gave it to my wife as a wedding present.
But wait, is that a Gullwing or was that a convertible?
190 SL is convertible. Gullwings are all they're the 300s.
SLs?
Yeah, I mean, they're serious Wonga.
Yeah, so 190s are all convertibles, or you could...
No, you can put a hard top on it, but they're all convertibles. I've got the hard top on this sort of thing with wheels.
My knowledge of SLs and Nogren.
No, that's a nice car, that one.
Yeah. You like a Gullwing.
Yeah.
You like pagodas. You like a pagoda.
Pagodas are lovely. Yeah. Pagoda's the model after the 190. You can get them in automatic. I've driven the auto. Is really bad because it's such an early automatic. It's like a 355 paddle. It's the first paddle. It's awful gearbox.
Disaster,
but the Pagoda, I love the look of the Pagoda.
Yeah, me too.
There's some nutters out there putting 6.3 litre Mercs in those Pagodas.
Are they?
Yeah, there's some German
You got excited, didn't you?
It's unbelievable.
What's that like? Because there's a massive steering wheel, doesn't it?
It's a big steering wheel, and it's got a centre steering wheel, which has got like you turn for your indicator, so you knock it with your thumb, and that's your indicator. Because it looks like two steering wheels. But I just think that 190 SL and the 300s, their interiors, I personally can't think of a more attractive interior on a car, and also the exterior is beautiful. But it basically, I agreed to buy it about 2 months after getting engaged with this plan of giving my wife a car on the wedding day.
Nice.
And again, typically things get out of hand, so like the restoration, it had come from South Africa. It was fairly beaten up, but it was matching engine and gearbox, and I paid to have it restored, changed the colour of the interior because it was black. I like the cognac, I love tan, that's why I did my Pista and Koya. and had it restored, and it arrived like the week before the wedding. I took it on the morning of the wedding with my dad outside the church, put a cover over it. There's a photo of my wife getting out of the wedding car to come into the church with it right there, and she had no idea it was under a cover. And then when we came
She
out,
walked straight past.
Yeah, so she's very focused
it.
at that point.
Yeah.
And then
Am I making the right decision?
And then I got one of my ushers. I said, as soon as we've sort of got married, go out, uncover it, and move it into position. So when we came out of the church, I gave her the keys, and so I don't class that as my car. That's definitely my present that I gave to her. And we'll always have that in the garage.
That'll be a lifer as well.
It's such a fantastic car, because on a sunny Sunday, you don't do more than 40, 50 miles an hour in it. It makes no noise at all. But the seats are unbelievably comfy. It's one of those old classics. Feels like you're on your old nan's sofa with the springs in it.
Sure.
So comfortable.
Smells like you're on your nan's sofa as well.
It's just, I love it more.
Beautiful things. Yeah,
beautiful.
and it's about the drive more than about the car.
Yeah.
And so you're just going out and you're having that experience. Yeah, I was lucky enough to drive. Can't remember what it was. It must have, maybe it was a 190. So in Beverly Hills years ago.
Yeah.
Super cool thing, but then it broke down, which was Tony would have predicted.
And actually, the other thing, I had 3 M4s, but I didn't buy them. They were sort of like lease cars, and I was sponsored by this company. I can't remember what they're called now. Probably Alphabet was the company.
Okay.
And I used to get a new one every 6 months, but they let me spec it. So I had 2 brown ones.
Brown?
No, sorry. I had 2 grey ones, and then the last one, I thought, I'm going to go a bit rogue here. So they do a colour called Pyrite Brown.
Yeah.
Which is sort of the colour of your jumper. It's
I
like
am
bronzy
a
brown.
huge fan of brown. People will know this on the podcast.
Yes.
I'm all about brown.
So that was my second year in F1. I was sponsored by that company. And my last one I had was a Pyrite Brown M4, black interior, black and silver wheels.
Is that company still exist?
Gorgeous.
Alphabet, huge company. It's a big leasing company, yeah.
I got to track that car down as well.
But those M4s, they were good fun. But I think deep down, I probably preferred my C63. That it made that rasp, and it was
For me, the M4s were just a bit of a blunt instrument. Like they didn't have enough. It was
Very
just,
spiky.
yeah,
tail happy as well.
Yeah.
very tail happy, and just a bit sort of bit dumb, like a bit sort of thick. Like C63 was full of character. But, do you know what I mean? Like,
You're gonna really upset some M.
I know, I already did. They all unsubscribed from my channel about 4 years ago. I only just won them back. But yes, okay. So the final question, which can be poignant, and you can also choose to say you have none, but regrets either in cars that you wish you hadn't sold or you missed because you had the chance to buy, and professionally in any moments where decisions that changed the things like. So yeah,
I don't think you should live with regrets. There's things you sort of think, maybe what happened if I did that differently. But hindsight is just an annoying thing, and don't let it ruin your life. You've got however many days and years and decades ahead of you. Focus on that. So I've got no regrets with what I've done in my life. Cars, probably got some regrets. I hadn't bought them like we all have.
Thank God you got out of that LT quickly though.
I keep myself. I do thank myself. Not thank myself. I think I'm very lucky for the position that I've been in, and I've had some amazing cars. So I just want to keep enjoying cars for what they are. Try and not have too many garage queens. I do want to sort of, if I'm not using a car, it's probably not for me, so sell it and just keep using the cars. But yeah, I'm a big Porsche. I just realised I'm forgetting all these cars. I've got a Porsche 50th. I had a Porsche 50th anniversary.
You're as bad as Tony.
Yeah,
when we did that
loved-
episode last
I
week, he was
loved-
like, "Oh wait, I forgot."
Porsche 50th anniversary, and I love that car.
Did you really though?
Absolutely loved it. And
Is
I
it
know
not
it's
just a
just a
Carrera
Carrera
S?
S. and
Yeah.
That's what everyone says. But it had the power pack. It had the Hound's 2 seats. It had the paddles, which you want, not the... they do those push paddles.
Yeah, weird paddles on the
I
steering
would
wheel.
always push up and then it would change down. I didn't know which way to go. So I love that. And my wife used that as well, and she loved that. So
I never got that car, and I love like retro and throwbacks, and it had lots. It had the Fuchs Stars wheels, didn't it?
Yeah, I just thought it was a lovely looking car. Mine was black, which there wasn't many in black. With had the silver around the window. It actually matches my 2.7 at RS massively.
Would have been nice to have the two alongside.
And I've got
each
a
other.
daily now. I've got a 3-litre diesel Vogue, which pretty much the profit from my Twisted paid for this. I'd done 65,000 miles and I needed a daily. So that is probably the most comfortable car I've ever owned. I'm just going to run it into the ground.
You can't
You
go
love
wrong with
those,
a Range
though.
Rover.
Yeah,
Can't go
you
wrong.
love
No, you can't. It's
Yeah, you just can't go wrong.
such a great smoker.
Just go up, they don't break. But
Yeah,
When
the
they're
first thing I
working.
did was go to this website and buy a year's sort of warranty cover for
Yeah.
it. And I did the electrics, I did the transmission, I did absolutely everything. Yeah.
Tick all the
Yeah.
boxes.
So, no.
Well, it feels like maybe there's another episode where you've got to come back and we'll talk more about the cars you forgot you've owned over the last few years. But mate, thank you so much for coming down. It's been
Pleasure.
super fun having a chat and for us to be able to nerd out on some F1 bits and then also, of course, road cars. If people want to, so I guess if they want to follow you, you're on Instagram and social media and things like that.
I mean, Instagram's pretty much the only thing I use. Facebook, I sort of occasionally see a message pop up, but I don't even know how to use it. I find it really clunky. Twitter, I've got a big following, but I hardly ever tweet unless I disapprove of the stewards in Formula 1. I think I need
that's your
to say my point.
Stir the pot.
Yeah, Instagram, and I have got a YouTube channel. I did one video on a Defender when I did that up. But yeah, apart from that, I'm just old school and just
find you on Instagram. Well, I'll link it in the description. Whether you're listening to us or watching us, check on the description if you want to follow Max and everything he's up to, the car storage, the development of, shout out that car again, what was it? The
McMurtry Spearling.
Oh my god, I can't wait for some more content on that. But anyway, thank you so much everyone for listening, for watching. If you're watching here on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications for future episodes. As I mentioned, if you want to follow Max, his links in the description. If you want to follow Tony, he's at Tony Gravelwood Car Sales on most social media platforms. I'm at Seen Through Glass on my social media platforms. And we'll be back with wow, I nearly did that so well, didn't I?
You always mess it up, mate.
Always, because I rushed towards the end. We'll be back with you for another episode next week. Bye bye.
See ya.